today we'll be doing a little challenge for a change. Now, this video was meant to be part of May's video release schedule, but part of it got held up by Amazon, so had to delay it and it's now out in June. Army Painter, as I'm sure you know, has just launched a new range of paints called the Fanatic line. I used to use Army Painter paints quite regularly, but quickly found that their old formula didn't quite work for what I wanted, and the AK 3rd generation of acrylics, Vallejo model colour and loads of other brands just took over. As I was also learning how to paint, I noticed that a lot of hobbyists made videos, they just didn't use them, and my old collection got relegated to the shelf that I'm sure we all have, where paints go up to dry. However, I've been told by Goobertown, Peachy and pretty much anybody else who's made a video on them that the Fanatic range are much better and really fun to use, so I thought we'd do just that and look to see how far you can push a paint set like this one. Now, in the box you get a miniature of a little knight, which is rather nice, a starter brush, although mine also came with a base coating brush stuck to the front of the box. I'm not entirely sure why, but I'll take it. Some grey brush on primer, which I'll try in a different video, probably using the airbrush just to speed things up. 2 metallics, a gold and a silver, black and white, green, red, yellow, blue and brown. They've all got their own names, but they're the general colours. And finally, a bottle of strong tone wash, which has been a staple of Army Painter for a while. Now, I can say right away that I probably won't be using the metallic paints, as I just don't get on with them. It's been too long since I'd last used a metallic paint, and even then it didn't go well. Instead, I'll be doing non-metallic metals as best as I can, using whatever comes in the box. We could focus on the knight that came in the box too, but it is a little small, and if you're familiar with my videos, you'll know how frequently I move the miniature off camera, so I've decided we'll be painting something a little larger. In this case, the Emperor's Champion from Warhammer 40k, a model that I've often considered painting because of all the extra ornamentation, but then stopped painting because of all the extra ornamentation, and the fact that Space Marines, in my opinion, are a bit dull, and I prefer an elf or something with a bit more character. We start with a base coat of matte black to all of the armour panels, or most of them anyway. I find base coating about as dull as Space Marines, so what I will normally do is start highlighting one certain area to make sure that the recipe that I wish to use works, and then I will go back to the other sections later. In this case, probably off camera too, just because you don't want to watch me do as the Rolling Stones say and paint it all black. Once that's done, I add white into the black to make a nice dark grey, and then highlight all of the panels in a volumetric pattern, keeping my brush always moving towards the point that I want to be the brightest, except when I don't because I forget. I then add more white in until it's a light grey and do the same thing again, just on a smaller area. Then I glaze over the transitions with pure matte black. Now, the Fanatic paints, or the black at least, seem to glaze really nicely, which is a big plus from the old ones. Once that was smoothed out, I reapplied a few dabs of the light grey and then added in some spots of pure matte white. I then continued this over a few more panels so that they're not just sitting there in the base coat. Next, I thought it would be best to base coat the cloth. As Black Templars normally have cream and white colours here and there, I thought I'd try cream as it's the colour I hate painting the most, almost as much as I hate white. Using demonic yellow, leather brown, a touch of white and some strong tone, I made a mix that looked a bit like Xandri Dust from Games Workshop, but thinned down with the addition of the strong tone. I applied this as a base coat and then added black with a tiny dab of red as a base coat for the gold sections too. I added some white and yellow to the cloth mix and made what looked a little like a Shabti bone, so I layered that over my gold area to start adding some ochre tones to it. As this started to look okay, I thought I'd finish the gold by adding more white at this stage, highlighting up again and then some final dabs of pure white here and there to add some sparkly bits. I had thought to do this to the belt buckle in gold, but as I'd got it very close to the cloth, I thought at that point that I should probably switch it to a darker metal just to get some contrast. Next, I turned my attention back to the cloth itself. With that same base coat mix, I added in a little touch of white, so probably about a brush tip's worth, and began glazing it towards the highest points or some creases into the cloth. This allowed some contrast and immediately started to look quite effective as a good cream, something that I'll have to keep in mind for future paint jobs because I hate painting cream, as I've said before, and it looks quite effective quite quickly. At this stage, it was reminding me of the works of Giuseppe Ciaffele or Lucas from Squidmar. See one of their more recent videos if you want to see it more. So I thought I'd lean into that aesthetic a little more because, hey, it's effective for them, so I shouldn't I have a go. Now it's time to tackle the black blade, which we're painting by adding blue to black, and then white with each subsequent highlight and applying it over the blade in a sort of checkerboard pattern, going across from each side of the blade. The whole process took a little bit longer than I perhaps would have liked, and I won't show you the entire thing because otherwise this video would be very, very long, but just hopefully with each of the clips you'll be able to see roughly what I'm doing and be able to apply it yourself. If you would like to see the full process, let me know and I'll put it up on Patreon or as another video or something. The same process is covered in some of my other videos as well, so you can get the same idea from those. Final highlight with white at the end to make it sparkle. This is perhaps the easiest non-metallic recipe that isn't just black and white, and I encourage you to give it a go because if it goes wrong, it's easy to paint over, and the chances are it won't go wrong anyway. Lenses, and since I hadn't used any green from the set, thought that we'd use that for the lenses themselves. Using a base coat of pure white, I then glazed green skin, that's the green from the set, over it a few times and then reapplied white over the lens of the helmet before a final coat of green. This just makes it so that the final layer is a little brighter and desaturated to make it look both glowing and also a little like glass. If you want to, you can also add a final dab of pure white just to make it look reflective. I didn't in this case because, well, I forgot. As we'd not used any pure red either, I did some checks on the tilting shield because, well, I'm never sure what to put on these things, and checks just seem to work quite nicely. Maybe it's a holdover from painting Bretonians as a child, I don't know. At this stage, we've got most of the surfaces and textures of the champions sorted, so it's just a case of applying them to each section in turn and doing some other techniques we can use to really enhance and see what else we can do with the starter set. Now, it won't be winning any awards, but if this is all you had, you can easily paint up an army with it, or indeed do some display pieces such as your character models or equivalents. One thing I should note at this stage is that the brushes that came with it were quite poor. It might be because I'm so used to using sable brushes at this point, but the starter brush I found nearly unusable. No brush should come with 4 tips straight out of the box. The base coating brush that was attached to the exterior was a little better, and I could have used that more, but I just found that my trusty Winsor & Newton Series 7 size 00 made life easier and painting quicker. If you're going into this as your first foray into painting, I'd suggest getting a few other brushes rather than just the starter brush if yours is anything like mine. As a few final details, I glazed some red into the shadows of the sword in order to contrast it with the blue. This was a decision I made afterwards after taking a few days away from the project. It makes it look a little bit more like the box art, but it also just helps with that temperature contrast that can really sell a metallic effect. I then decided to see if the Fanatic set would work with OSL, and I'm very pleased to say that it does. For those of you who don't know, OSL is Object Source Lighting, that is to say, things being properly glowy. I started with a base coat of pure red, then added in some yellow into the mix until it was a sort of pinky orange. I'll include a picture of this onto the screen because it doesn't make a bright orange. I think this is because of the amount of white that is in the red anyway, because most pre-mixed paints will have black and white, as Goobertown says in his video. Now you can see here that all I'm doing is just applying a little bit of that mix that I'd got before onto the surrounding lantern and indeed the areas where light would naturally hit. That is to say, some of the bands around the lantern, a little bit onto the armour and a little onto the tabard. This is important to do with OSL because it just shows that it is glowing. If you've got a glowing area that isn't casting light onto something, it's not really glowing. Now I'm not going to paint the entire marine because, as I've said before, I do find them quite dull to work on, despite owning quite a few of them. Really should get rid of them or just use them as test minis, one of the two. But it has given me a chance to show off how these paints work and with the various techniques that you might not generally think to use with them. To summarise, the black metallic on the armour can be achieved really easily for how well these paints thin to a glaze consistency. Now, glazing was something that I often got annoyed with the old formula because I often found that the more I thinned the paints down, the further apart the pigments would spread and so they wouldn't glaze particularly well or they'd dry with tide marks. This can get really annoying. This isn't something that I found with AK or Vallejo, or not as much anyway. In terms of mixing, they work really nicely, but with them being pre-mixed in the bottle, the pigments are something of a mystery, so some don't quite mix as you would expect, such as what I encountered with the red and yellow, not creating quite as pure an orange as I would have liked. Still not a deal breaker, but it just was a little unexpected. For layering, they work excellently. Glazing, they're excellent, and I think, other than getting used to how thick they are out of the bottle, they're a great starting point for any painter, or a painter who just wants a little change or a challenge now and then. As I said before, I'm not keen on the brushes that they came with, but you can't expect much from ones that are included free within a paint set. If you're just starting out, they're probably fine, but after a few uses, they're going to start showing their limitations. I'd suggest getting a few of the Army Painter brushes, or perhaps some from other brands that are out there. Find one that works for you, even if that brand is indeed a bulk buy one from Amazon for a load of those cost-effective synthetic ones. Sometimes they are excellent, sometimes they're not, but at the price that you're paying for them, chances are you're going to get a decent amount for the price. Anyway, I think that's all from me. If you want to give this a try, all you need is the Fanatic Paint Starter Set and a miniature of your choice. The techniques involved can be carried over to other paint sets and indeed other miniatures too, so if you've learned something from this video, why not leave a like? If you're new to the channel, welcome. You might want to subscribe so you can see when I release a new video. I also have a Patreon, which now has some content on it. Promised there'd be some soon. This consists of 2 several thousand word PDF guides on volumetric painting, brush control, various techniques. It also features a big list of my non-metallic metal recipes, and the second guide is on a box art that I painted a little while ago and gives you a step-by-step process of how I do cloth, metals, glows, anything that was really included on it. Now you can get access to those from the lowest tier that is available, and you also get access to my Discord. Now I've left them at the lowest tier because, quite frankly, I understand that my channel is very new, the Patreon's very new, so if you're just dipping your toe into it, you can get them and then cancel if you want. Don't worry, I won't be offended. If you can't afford to support, or you just don't want to, that's absolutely your prerogative, and just watching and subscribing is more than enough for me, and I'd like to extend my thanks for all those that have already done so. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so I'll see you in the next video, where we'll finally be getting some more done on the Spira Mirabilis Goblin.